Personal log. Dr. Susan Jefferies. Stardate 41140.2. The invitation had arrived 2 days earlier, a crisp holographic card delivered straight to my quarters at Starfleet Medical Headquarters on Earth. A private recital at the residence of Starbase 74's commandant, in orbit of the Federation colony world of Regulus 3. Chamber music from the classical Earth repertoire, with select guests. I almost declined. My practice for the last 8 years had been planetside. Trauma wards, research labs, the steady rhythm of a hospital that never slept. Space was for the young, the restless, the ones who still believed the stars held answers instead of just questions. Yet something in me stirred. Perhaps it was the faint echo of family legacy, my ancestors' quiet genius that once helped map the very arteries of starships like the one I was about to board. Jefferies tubes, they called them, a small thing really, but it reminded me that exploration had always begun with someone willing to crawl into the unknown. I beamed over to the starbase that evening in my dress uniform, the fabric still carrying the faint scent of Earth rain. The commandant's residence was a graceful dome on the upper levels, its panoramic windows framing the swirling clouds of Regulus 3 below and the sleek curve of docked starships beyond. The USS Penrose was out there somewhere in the repair slips, Galaxy class, I'd read in the briefing packet. 642 meters of exploration, science, and diplomacy, wrapped around a warp core that could outrun most problems and a crew that could outthink the rest. I tried not to let the thought quicken my pulse. Professional detachment, Susan. You're here for the music. The recital hall was intimate by Starbase standards. Velvet seating for perhaps 50, soft lighting from recessed illuminators, and a low stage where a string quartet was already tuning. I took my seat near the back, notebook pad in hand out of habit. The piece was Beethoven's String Quartet No. 14 in C-sharp minor. Slow, meditative, the kind of music that feels like it's been waiting in the vacuum for centuries. Perfect for unwinding. Then he sat down 2 rows ahead of me, broad shoulders, captain's pips glinting under the lights, dark hair just beginning to show the silver of experience. Captain Sean McMurray. I recognized the name from the fleet roster. The Penrose was his. He was tapping the armrest lightly with one finger, keeping time, or trying to. It was subtle, but in that hushed room it felt like a warp core breach in miniature. Without thinking, my elbow found his shoulder. A gentle nudge. Correction, not confrontation. He turned, eyes sharp as a phaser lock at first, then relaxing into a look of recognition, then finally settling on mild annoyance. The music swelled around us, but the air between us tightened like a force field. "Doctor," he whispered, voice low. "My reflexes are fine. Thank you." "Perhaps, but your ear and hand coordination is something you might want to get checked out." "Captain," I replied, equally quiet. The measure deserves respect. After formally introducing ourselves, the captain revealed he was already aware of who I was. "You were on a very short list of top candidates in your field." "Candidates for what exactly?" I replied. But I already knew. Captain's log, Stardate 41140.3. Shore leave at Starbase 74 has been productive. The ship's refit is complete. New interphase warp core coils installed, saucer separation protocols recalibrated, and the new sensor array tuned for long-range convoy escort. Starfleet Command has assigned us a straightforward mission. Accompany a small convoy of 3 civilian freighters through the Regulus sector trade lanes. Routine, they call it. But the lanes skirt close enough to the Romulan neutral zone that routine has a way of developing teeth. I've reviewed the crew roster again. We're solid. First Officer Gustavo Arau is already aboard, running tactical drills. Operations Officer Navi has the bridge watch. Still one critical vacancy. Chief Medical Officer, the last one transferred to a research outpost 6 months ago. I've been reviewing candidates from Starfleet Medical. One name keeps rising, Dr. Susan Jefferies. Earth-based, highly regarded in xenobiology and emergency trauma. No Starship experience, but her evaluations suggest a quick study. Perhaps the stars are aligning. Personal log, Dr. Susan Jefferies. Supplemental. The next morning I was walking the Star Base's main promenade. Wide corridors lined with replicators, potted Andorian orchids, and the soft hum of civilian traffic, when I nearly collided with him again. Captain McMurray, this time in a casual jacket, carrying a violin case under one arm. His face lit up, the earlier tension evaporating like a dissipating plasma cloud. Dr. Jefferies, fate or just poor traffic control? I smiled despite myself. Perhaps both, Captain. We fell into step. He mentioned the mission, escort duty, nothing glamorous. But it would take the Penrose out for weeks, independent cruising afterward, if all went well. Then, almost casually, he asked if I played. I admitted I played the cello. He said he played violin. Before I knew it, we were in a small recital alcove off the promenade, instruments borrowed from the Star Base's arts program. The duet was tentative at first, Bach's air on the G-string, slow and contemplative, the notes hanging in the air like distant nebulae. Something clicked. We discovered we both preferred the meditative pieces, the ones that let you think between the measures. He spoke of the violin as his anchor during long voyages. I confessed medicine had been my anchor, but the stars had begun to whisper lately. Then came the invitation. Starfleet Medical has given me discretion on the CMO posting, he said, setting the violin down. I'd like you on the Penrose, Chief Medical Officer. The ship's sick bay is state-of-the-art. 3 wards, 4 med labs, a surgical suite that can handle anything short of a planetary epidemic, and an emergency biosupport unit that's saved more lives than I can count. But more than that, we need a doctor who understands people as well as physiology. You strike me as that kind of doctor. I kept my face professionally neutral, but inside my heart rate spiked like a warp field fluctuation. Me? Aboard a Galaxy-class starship? I'd only ever practiced on Earth, steady gravity, familiar protocols, no red alerts in the middle of surgery, yet the thought of deep space, of treating a crew that included families and civilians, of contributing to something larger. It felt right. I accepted, of course. Calmly, professionally. It would be an honor, Captain. Personal log, Dr. Susan Jefferies, stardate 41152.3. Transfer orders processed in under an hour. Starfleet Medical moves with surprising efficiency when a captain requests someone by name. I packed light, medical texts on pad, a few civilian clothes, and the cello. Regulations allowed it. Senior officers' quarters on Galaxy-class vessels are generous, with sound-dampening fields and even small rehearsal alcoves if you know where to look. The shuttle ride over was short, but I chose the transporter instead. Quicker, and I wanted the full experience. The transporter chief's voice was crisp over the comm. Energizing. The familiar tingle, the shimmer of molecules, and then I materialized in Transporter Room 3 of the USS Penrose. The room was larger than I expected, blue-gray bulkheads gleaming under soft overhead lighting, the transporter platform recessed into a polished deck. 2 ensigns waited with my belongings. "Welcome aboard, Doctor," the chief said with a nod. "Captain McMurray asked me to escort you to your quarters first, then sick bay if you're ready." I stepped off the pad and felt it immediately. The subtle, living hum of a starship under power, not the sterile quiet of an Earth hospital, but a heartbeat, deep, resonant, alive. The corridors beyond were wide, carpeted in that distinctive Starfleet blue with silver trim along the bulkheads. Silver blue paneling reflected the soft glow of LCAR's interfaces. The crew moved with purpose. Officers in gold, blue, and red, A few civilians in civilian attire carrying pads or leading small children toward the schools on Deck 8. Galaxy-class vessels were designed for long-duration missions. Families were part of the complement. Schools, nurseries, even an arboretum. It was luxurious compared to what I'd imagined. Impressive, almost indulgent. Yet it made sense. Morale on a vessel this size, with a crew of over 1,000+ civilians, required more than just duty stations. My quarters were on Deck 6 Senior Officer Section, spacious living area, separate bedroom, a viewport that currently showed the Starbase's docking arms sliding away as the Penrose prepared to depart. I set the cello case down gently. The replicator hummed to life at my voice command. Everything felt new, yet welcoming. The turbo lift ride to sickbay changed everything. The doors opened on Deck 12, and there he was. Commander Gustavo Arau, first officer. Tall, dark-haired, with the quiet poise of someone who had seen more than his share of border skirmishes. Our eyes met. Recognition flashed between us like a subspace signal, sharp, private, unmistakable. We had known each other years earlier, during the final days of the Cardassian occupation of Bajor. Not officially, of course. A loose network of Starfleet officers and sympathetic civilians who had quietly funneled medical supplies, coordinated safe passages for Bajoran refugees, supported the liberation in ways that never made it into official logs. It had been risky. Siding with Bajor against Cardassia could still raise eyebrows in certain diplomatic circles. If the Penrose ever found itself on a neutral zone mission or a first contact detail involving former Cardassian space. The turbolift hummed upward. We were alone. Dr. Jefferies, Gus said softly, voice low enough that the computer wouldn't register it as a command. It's been a long time. Commander Arau, I replied, matching his tone. Gus, I didn't expect to see you here. A faint smile. Nor I you. The past stays in the past, unless the captain asks directly. Agreed? Agreed. No conflict of interest on my watch. The lift slowed. Starfleet regulations are clear on that. The doors opened onto sickbay. He stepped aside. Welcome to the Penrose, Doctor. I think you'll find her accommodating. I stepped into my new domain and the doors whispered shut behind me. Biobeds lined the walls, each with overhead sensor clusters ready to scan a dozen life signs at once. The surgical suite gleamed with sterile precision. Medlabs hummed with diagnostic equipment far beyond anything I'd used on Earth. Through the viewport, I could see the stars beginning to streak as the ship moved away from the starbase. Warp fields not yet engaged, but the promise was there. Captain's log, supplemental. Dr. Jefferies is aboard. The convoy rendezvous is set for 0600 tomorrow. The Penrose feels complete again, and if the neutral zone decides to test us, well, we'll be ready. Personal log, Dr. Susan Jefferies. I stood at the viewport in sickbay, watching the stars. The ship was massive, elegant, alive with possibility. I was no longer just a doctor from Earth. I was Chief Medical Officer of the USS Penrose, a Galaxy-class explorer. The hum beneath my feet felt like the beginning of something slow, something contemplative, like the first long note of a cello in an empty concert hall. And somewhere out there, the stars waited. Personal log, Dr. Susan Jefferies, star date 41310.1. The first week aboard the Penrose has been a gentle immersion rather than the shock I half expected. Galaxy-class starships are not simply vessels. They are self-contained worlds. Deck 12's sickbay is my domain now, 6 biobeds in the main ward, each with a full suite of biosensors capable of real-time metabolic mapping across 17 known humanoid species and 12 more exobiologic variants. The surgical suite can isolate a patient in a level 10 force field while the EMH runs parallel diagnostics. It's light years beyond the trauma bays I knew on Earth. Yet the real revelation has been the amenities woven into daily life for the 1,000-plus crew and their civilian families. A full arboretum on Deck 8 with replicated soil from a dozen Federation worlds. 10 forward on Deck 10, where the lighting softens at 2200 hours to mimic twilight, and the replicators serve Endorian spiced tea without being asked twice. Even the holodecks are booked months in advance by school groups running educational simulations of ancient Vulcan deserts or the cliffs of Rysar. Starfleet Regulations, Section 47, Paragraph 12 of the Starship Operations Manual, insist that long-duration missions maintain civilian morale standards equivalent to a planetary colony. I'm beginning to understand why. The hum of the ship is constant, but never intrusive, a low warp-core thrum that feels almost meditative. I have kept my promise to remain professional. Captain McMurray and I have shared one quiet violin and cello evening in the observation lounge, working through a slow arrangement of Mozart's Duo in B-flat. He plays with the same half-beat-ahead enthusiasm I first noticed at the recital, but here, between the stars, it feels less like a challenge and more like an invitation. He spoke briefly of his own history, how a fleeting cadet romance with the daughter of a now admiral had earned him a permanent black mark in certain personnel files. "Doesn't bother me," he said with a quiet laugh, fingers resting on the strings. "I'd rather command a ship that actually goes places than sit behind a desk counting regulations." I found myself nodding before I could stop. There is an adventurous spark in him that mirrors something I have only recently admitted in myself. The same spark that once made my ancestor crawl through the first Jefferies tubes on the old NX-class prototypes. I did not mention it aloud. Not yet. Captain's log, stardate 4132.2.7. Convoy escort duties commenced on schedule. The 3 civilian freighters, SS Regulus Trade, Orion's Bounty, and the smaller Betazoid Horizon, are carrying agricultural replicator components and medical supplies bound for the colony at Cestus 3. Standard Starfleet protocol under General Order 12 requires continuous sensor sweeps at 5 light-year intervals, with the Penrose maintaining position 2 kilometers off the lead ship's port quarter. First Officer Arau has the con during Gamma shift. Lieutenant Navi is monitoring the long-range tactical array from operations. The neutral zone boundary lies only 12 parsecs to starboard. Routine on paper. But space has a way of rewriting the orders. Personal log, Dr. Susan Jefferies. Supplemental. I've begun my rounds of the crew quarters to familiarize myself with the medical histories of over 1,000 souls. Ensign Carter in engineering confessed to a mild fear of transporter malfunctions. I prescribed a low-dose hyranolin regimen and a holodeck program of wide-open planetary skies. Crewman Tuvel, a young Vulcan science officer, required nothing but a quiet acknowledgement that even Vulcans sometimes experience the subtle disorientation of variable gravity on the lower decks. The ship's gravity plating is calibrated to 1.0 G standard, but microfluctuations occur during saucer separation drills. Another regulation I've filed away for future reference. Commander Arau, Gus, and I have maintained our agreement. A single shared glance in the turbo lift yesterday was enough. The Bajoran relief efforts we both supported in the old days were never officially sanctioned. Starfleet's non-interference directive has gray areas when Cardassia is involved, and neither of us wishes to complicate a future diplomatic mission. The Penrose is a ship of exploration, not old grudges. The convoy itself has been uneventful by design. I observed the bridge during one of my off-duty hours, Captain McMurray's standing invitation to senior staff. The view screen showed the freighters as steady blue icons against a star field that seemed to stretch forever. Lieutenant Navi, our Vulcan operations officer, reported clear sensor readings with her usual economy of words, No anomalous energy signatures within range, Captain. McMurray simply nodded, eyes on the tactical display, as if listening to music only he could hear. Captain's log, stardate 41364.4. Escort duties completed without incident. The freighters have peeled off for Cestus 3 under their own power. Admiral Keith has granted us independent cruising orders for the next 3 weeks. Primary objective, patrol the outer fringes of the Regulus sector, mapping previously uncharted nebulae and maintaining a visible Federation presence near the neutral zone. The crew is sharp. Dr. Jefferies has already streamlined sickbay's triage protocols, impressing even the veterans. I find myself looking forward to our next musical interlude. There is something about her calm precision that reminds me why I joined Starfleet in the first place. Not for rank, but for the unknown. Personal log, Dr. Susan Jefferies, stardate 41366.1. Independent cruise agrees with the Penrose. The ship feels larger somehow, as if the corridors breathe easier without the convoy's shadow. I've taken to walking the outer ring of Deck 18 during beta shift, wide carpeted passages lined with family quarters where children's laughter occasionally spills into the corridor. The amenities continue to astonish. A civilian-accessible library on Deck 14 with physical books alongside holographic archives. A gymnasium that can simulate zero-G or high-gravity environments with the touch of a panel. Starfleet understands that a crew at peak morale is a crew that can face the unknown without flinching. Yet I sense a subtle tension on the bridge these past few days. Nothing overt. Captain McMurray has been unusually quiet during status reports. Lieutenant Navi's posture is fractionally more rigid than her customary Vulcan reserve. I caught them exchanging a single glance yesterday while I was delivering a routine medical update. Something unspoken, like the final note of a chord held just long enough to imply the next movement. I have not pressed the matter. Regulations are clear. The command staff's operational awareness is theirs to share at the proper time. Still, as Chief Medical Officer, I monitor the crew's stress markers. Pulse rates are nominal. No one is hiding fear, only anticipation. Captain's log, supplemental. We have maintained course 215 Mark 7 at warp 4.5. The mapping of the Lambda Regulus Nebula is proceeding on schedule. Dr. Jefferies continues to adapt beautifully. I suspect she and I share more than a love of slow movements in minor keys. The stars out here feel watchful, but then they always do, near the neutral zone. Personal log, Dr. Susan Jefferies. I was in sickbay reviewing the latest crew physicals when the ship-wide alert tone sounded. Not red, merely yellow. A soft chime. The voice of Ensign Harkin at the helm cut through the comm. Bridge to all senior officers. Captain, we have a confirmed energy signature at bearing 180 Mach 03. Distance, 2.7 million kilometers. It matches the profile of a Cardassian ship, but it was cloaked. There is a .001 phase variance in their core. They've been shadowing us for... The voice faltered. I stepped into the corridor just as the turbo lift doors opened on the bridge. Captain McMurray was already in the command chair. Gus stood at tactical, expression unreadable. Lieutenant Navi remained at ops, hands poised above the console as if the stars themselves required her supervision. The entire bridge crew had turned toward the captain. Eyes wide, whispers rippling like static across an open channel. Ensign Harkin's voice, now hesitant, turned around and finished the report aloud. Captain, I don't understand how we missed it until now. A beat of stunned silence. Captain McMurray leaned forward slightly, the corner of his mouth lifting in the faintest, almost amused smile. He glanced once at Lieutenant Navi, who gave the smallest Vulcan nod of confirmation. It's all right, Ensign, he said, voice calm as a cello's open string. I've known about our little secret admirer here for a while now. Harkin blinked once, became suddenly aware that her mouth was hanging open, and closed it with an audible chomp before turning back to the helm. Captain's log supplemental. The stars have been watching us longer than we realized. A Cardassian Gala-class warship has shadowed our every course correction since we left the convoy behind. Powered by a matter-antimatter reactor, she is ubiquitous in the Cardassian Union's cruiser fleet. But Lieutenant Navi and I detected the telltale .001 phase variance in her emissions days ago. We kept it compartmentalized under Tactical Directive 19B. No panic. No premature escalation. Just quiet observation while the Penrose continued her mapping runs through the Lambda Regulus Nebula at a leisurely warp 4.5. They were testing us, probing the edges of Federation space, lingering near the trade lanes where our convoy had passed. Now the test ends. The bridge is calm. The kind of calm that comes before a single, perfectly placed note changes everything. The view screen shows only stars and faint nebular wisps, but the long-range tachyon grid paints a different picture. A ghost, massive and patient, 700,000 kilometers off our starboard quarter and closing. Mr. Davidson, access phaser firing pattern, Cyclops 2. Frequency modulation sequence 1. Approach and fire at 300 kilometers. Personal log, Dr. Susan Jefferies. I was in sickbay when the yellow alert tone sounded again. Still no klaxons, only that soft, meditative chime that tells the crew to remain alert without panic. The biobeds hummed at standby, their overhead sensor clusters glowing a gentle blue, ready to map metabolic shifts across 17 humanoid species and a dozen exobiologic variants in real time. I had been reviewing the latest biometric scans from the civilian families on Deck 14, children adapting beautifully to the subtle microfluctuations in the gravity plating, when the comm channel from the bridge opened. Bridge to sickbay. Stand by for possible casualties. Non-lethal engagement protocol in effect. All medical teams remain at stations. I acknowledged, heart steady beneath my uniform tunic. The surgical suite's level 10 force field emitters flickered once to life on standby, the EMH's alcove diagnostic lights pulsing in quiet readiness. I trusted the captain. I trusted the ship. The Penrose is a Galaxy-class explorer, her 12 Type X phaser arrays distributed in overlapping arcs along the saucer and star drive sections. Each emitter segment capable of delivering up to 5.25 megawatts when modulated correctly. But this wasn't brute force. This was precision born of preparation. On the bridge, I learned later, the tension had been building like the slow swell of a cello prelude. Ensign Harkin at the helm kept her hands light on the navigational controls, the view screen centered on empty space that wasn't empty at all. Lieutenant Navi at Ops had her fingers poised above the tactical overlay, her Vulcan features composed but her posture fractionally more rigid than usual. Commander Arau stood at the first officer's station, arms crossed, eyes on the same ghost signal. And at tactical, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Davidson, Mark David to those who knew him best, had already called up the preset. Cyclops 2. Navi and the captain had programmed it weeks ago during a late-night simulation in Holodeck 3, back when the first faint signal variants had appeared. Galaxy-class phasers are not static beams. Their nadion particle discharge can be frequency modulated on the fly, shifting resonance harmonics in microseconds to interact with specific materials, shield frequencies, or exotic power sources. Standard Type X arrays locked to a target's second-order deflector harmonics to prevent rebound, but Cyclops 2 went further. It rotated the beam through a preset harmonic cascade designed specifically for a Gala's shields. One sustained burst, no torpedoes, no wasted energy. The modulation would resonate with their core's emissions, inducing a controlled instability that collapses the cloak, disables phasers and disruptors, and leaves life support and the core itself untouched. Elegant. Mark David keyed the preset. The forward dorsal array began to glow, subtle at first, a warm orange-red deepening as the frequency modulators engaged. Power drew smoothly from the warp core. No spikes, just a controlled surge held at 73% by Chief Engineer von Roder's careful monitoring down in engineering. Captain's log, supplemental. The beam lanced out in less than a second, a brilliant stream of modulated nadions that shifted color subtly, orange to gold to a precise crimson, as the frequencies cycled. On the view screen, the distortion first shimmered, then flared like a dying ember. The warship's cloak collapsed in stages, each nullifier coil failing in sequence under the harmonic assault. There she was, massive, proud, her pale orange-tinged hull catching the nebula's reflected light, plasma vents flickering as secondary systems struggled. No return fire. Her disruptor arrays remained dark, the core damped but stable. Life support signatures held steady across her 500-plus crew complement. The bridge let out a collective breath I hadn't realized it was holding. Ensign Harkin's hands relaxed on the helm. "Sir, that was beautiful." I allowed myself the smallest grin. "Thank you, Ensign. Hail them. Open channel." The Cardassian commander appeared on screen. Tall, eyes narrow. The bridge behind him showed controlled chaos. Consoles sparking faintly, crew moving with disciplined urgency. He spoke with the measured courtesy of someone who knows the rules of the game have just shifted, but his voice carried the faintest edge of calculation. "Federation vessel, cease your attack. This is a misunderstanding. Our navigation array suffered a critical malfunction. We did not realize we had drifted into disputed space so close to your trade convoy. A regrettable error of our warp drive's calibration. We meant no provocation." I leaned forward slightly in the command chair, the soft blue glow of the LCAR's panels reflecting off my pips. The lie was polished, almost believable, if we hadn't tracked her phase variance for days, and if Na'vi hadn't logged every deliberate course adjustment to stay just outside sensor range. Starfleet protocol demanded courtesy, however, even now. "Commander," I replied, voice calm as the low thrum of the Penrose's warp core, "this is Captain Sean McMurray of the USS Penrose. Your navigation malfunction placed you in precise shadowing formation for the entirety of our independent cruise. We have full sensor logs. You are in violation of truce agreements and the neutral zone accords. Stand down and prepare to be boarded by a Federation security detail. No further action will be taken against your vessel. You will be processed at the nearest starbase, given a formal hearing under interstellar law, and then repatriated to Cardassian authorities. Your superiors will hear your explanation there." He held my gaze a moment longer, the lie hanging between us like an unresolved chord. Then he inclined his head once, the smallest acknowledgement. "We will comply." Personal log, Dr. Susan Jefferies. Supplemental. I watched the rest from the bridge observation gallery, Captain McMurray's standing invitation for senior staff during non-combat evolutions. The USS Gibraltar, a nearby Akira-class patrol ship, dropped out of warp 20 minutes later, her nacelles glowing steady blue against the nebula. Starfleet security teams beamed across under standard first contact protocols, their phaser rifles set to heavy stun. The Cardassians would be taken into custody, treated with full diplomatic courtesy, given a trial that would be logged, analyzed, and quietly leveraged in the next round of treaty negotiations back on Earth. No loss of life, no escalation, just a quiet, symbolic victory that diplomats dream of and captains rarely get to deliver with such precision. The crew's congratulations were warm, unhurried, the kind that lingers like the final note of a sonata. Commander Arau clasped the captain's shoulder with a quiet, "Well played, sir." The modulation for Cyclops 2 was flawless. Lieutenant Na'vi offered the faintest Vulcan nod of approval, her dark eyes reflecting the star field. Even Max's voice came over the comm from engineering, thick German accent laced with genuine admiration. "Captain, the power curve on those phasers never even spiked above 73%. Their interface never knew what hit it. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful." Ensign Harkin actually laughed softly at the helm, the tension finally breaking. I found myself smiling from the gallery, my own fingers itching for the slow, satisfied movement that would come later in the observation lounge with cello and violin. The Penrose felt alive in a new way, every deck plate humming with shared relief and quiet pride. Captain's log, stardate 41422.6. The Gibraltar has the Cardassian vessel under escort. Our part is done. The Penrose will resume independent mapping operations at 800 tomorrow. For now, the stars feel lighter. The measure has resolved. Personal log, Captain Sean McMurray. The doors whispered shut behind Lieutenant Narvi. I sat at the desk, the ready room's ambient lighting dialed to a soft 40%. Twilight for the soul, the kind that lets a man think between the measures. A single pad rested in my hands. The official communique from Starfleet Command had arrived during the debrief, routed through secure subspace with all the proper encryption seals. I read it aloud for her benefit, voice low and measured. Captain Sean McMurray has once again demonstrated exemplary command of the USS Penrose. His handling of the neutral zone incursion reflects the highest standards of Starfleet professionalism and tactical foresight. His use of modulated phaser protocols to neutralize the superior vessel without casualties stands as a model for future engagements. He's a credit to the uniform and to the ideals of the Federation. I set the pad down gently on the polished surface. Narvi stood at parade rest, head tilted a fraction, the Vulcan equivalent of a raised eyebrow. Fascinating. The wording is precise. Exemplary captain. Yet there is no mention of promotion. No new assignment to a larger vessel class. No flag rank consideration. The phrasing is repetitive of prior commendations. I leaned back, fingers laced behind my head, and let a quiet chuckle escape. The ready room viewport framed the nebula in soft violets and roses, the Penrose holding station at 1/4 impulse, while sensor palettes extended like gentle, curious hands. You noticed? Most people miss it the first time. This is coded language, Narvi. The kind Starfleet Command uses when they've decided a man belongs exactly where he is forever. I'll stay captain of a Galaxy-class starship until they decommission the class, or I retire. No admiral's desk waiting in some orbital tower, no promotion board reviews, just this. She was silent a moment, processing the human nuance with that precise Vulcan logic. The chronometer on the wall ticked softly. Starfleet issue, always set to 24-hour standard even when the ship's clocks ran on ship time. As a human, would you not feel unfairly treated? Bitter. The professional ladder is the accepted metric of success in your culture. Advancement is expected, desired. Command of a single vessel, no matter how capable, is rarely considered the pinnacle. I looked past her, through the viewport at the star field. Slow, endless, perfect. The same view that had kept me sane through 1,000 night watches. The same view I had first shared with Dr. Susan Jefferies in the observation lounge over a tentative Bach duet. Narvi, I love this. The ship, the hum of her under my feet, warp core, steady at 87%, gravity plating calibrated to 1.0 G, every Jefferies tube and corridor breathing with the life of over 1,000 souls. The way the crew becomes family on long cruises. The chance to play violin while the stars streak by at warp 6, or to face down a warship with nothing but a pre-programmed phaser pattern called Cyclops 2 that dances through nullifier coils like a perfectly timed cello phrase. I never wanted a promotion. If they offered me one tomorrow, I'd refuse it. Politely. Firmly. Because the moment I accept, I stop being the man who gets to chase nebulae and face down warships. I become the bureaucrat who approves the patents for someone else. And that doesn't appeal to my adventurous nature. I paused, a small smile touching my lips. Funny thing is, I'm only just starting to realize Dr. Jefferies shares that same spark. She came aboard for the adventure, not the rank. We both did. Navi paused longer this time, the ready room's soft lighting catching the subtle arch of her brow. There was something almost warm in her expression. Almost. Fascinating, she said at last. The word carried layers, the way only a Vulcan could layer it. Your perspective is logical in its own way. Permission to return to duty, Captain? Granted, Lieutenant. Thank you. No need to get too emotional. She nodded once, turned on her heel with that precise Vulcan economy of motion, and the doors closed behind her with a soft pneumatic sigh. Alone, I smiled to myself. Small, private, the kind of smile that comes after the final note of a long sonata has faded into the vacuum. I reached for the datapad again, keyed in my final report to Starfleet Command. Sensor logs of the Galler's deliberate shadowing. Speculation on the origin of its unsanctioned black market cloaking device. Recommendations for updating Tactical Directive 19B. Beneath it all, a quiet satisfaction. Personal log, Dr. Susan Jefferies. The Penrose glides through the Lambda Regulus Nebula at 1/4 impulse, sensor pallets extended like gentle hands reaching for answers. I stood beside Captain McMurray on the bridge earlier, watching the plasma tendrils drift across the view screen in hues of violet and rose. He tapped the armrest in rhythm with the thrum of the engines, and I found myself smiling, without reservation this time. Perhaps his timing is all right, after all.